Freedom begins in the mind long before it ever shows up in your circumstances. You can change your location, your job, your circle of friends, even your lifestyle, but if your mind is still chained, life will always find a way to pull you back into bondage. The real battlefield is not around you, it's within you. Every decision, every action, every emotion flows from the thoughts that dominate your mind. You can dress like you're free, talk like you're free, and still live behind invisible walls because your thinking hasn't been renewed. The body simply follows where the mind leads. So if your thoughts are trapped, your life will never move beyond that prison. The mind has the power to either liberate you or limit you. If you keep feeding it with fear, negativity, and defeat, it will construct a cage made from your own beliefs. Every I can't, every I'm not enough, every it's too late for me becomes another bar on the window. That's why transformation doesn't start with trying harder. It starts with thinking differently. You can't change what you do until you change what you believe. The heart follows the mind and the hands follow the heart. The first step toward freedom then is not external, it's internal. Many people pray for a new season, but God is waiting for a renewed mindset. He can open every door, but if you're still thinking like a prisoner, you'll never walk through it. You'll keep sitting in the same corner of the same cell, blaming circumstances while the key is sitting right there in your hand. That key is called truth. Truth is what transforms the mind. When you fill your thoughts with what God says about you, instead of what your failures scream at you, you begin to dismantle the prison walls. You begin to see that you're not trapped. You're transformed. This is why Scripture tells us to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Renewal is not a one-time event, it's a daily process. Every day, the enemy tries to slip another lie through the cracks of your thinking. Every day, you have to decide whose voice you will believe. Will you believe the voice of your past or the voice of your purpose? Will you accept the chains of guilt, or will you lift your eyes to the truth that you are already free? The difference between bondage and breakthrough often comes down to what you let your mind agree with. So, if you truly want freedom, you must begin within. Guard your thoughts like treasure because they determine your direction. Replace every fearful thought with a word of faith. Confront every lie with the truth of who you are. Freedom doesn't come when life gets easier. It comes when your thinking gets stronger. The moment you stop letting your thoughts control you and start controlling your thoughts, the prison door begins to swing open. Freedom begins not with your hands, not with your feet, but with your mind choosing to believe truth over lies. The most dangerous prison is the one you cannot see. It doesn't have iron gates. It doesn't clang shut behind you. And yet it holds more people captive than any physical cell ever could. This prison is built in the mind, quietly, slowly, invisibly. It's constructed with thoughts of fear, regret, and insecurity. Every time you believe a lie about yourself, another brick is laid. Every time you let doubt speak louder than faith, another lock is added to the door. And before long, you find yourself trapped in a place you never realized you entered. You're moving through life, smiling, working, talking, but inside there's confinement. You feel it when you lie awake at night, replaying mistakes you can't undo. You feel it when opportunities appear, but fear whispers, you're not ready. You feel it when you know there's more in you, yet something unseen keeps pulling you back. That something is the invisible prison of the mind. The enemy loves this kind of prison because it doesn't require chains. All it takes is suggestion, a whisper of defeat, a memory of failure, a false belief dressed as truth. He doesn't need to keep you physically locked away if he can keep your mind occupied with fear and confusion. A trapped mind creates a trapped life. You can live in a free country, work under an open sky, and still carry a mental cage everywhere you go. That's why freedom cannot be measured by where your body stands, but by what your mind believes. This kind of imprisonment often goes unnoticed because it doesn't look dramatic. It looks like endless hesitation. It looks like procrastination, low confidence, overthinking. It sounds like maybe later or I'm not ready yet. It's subtle but deadly. A person can live their entire life within the same emotional radius because the limits of their thoughts have become the walls of their existence. The tragedy is not that the prison exists, it's that the door has already been opened, but the captive doesn't know it. Breaking free from an invisible prison requires recognition. You can't fight what you refuse to see. That's why awareness is the first step toward deliverance. When you start noticing the thoughts that hold you back, you expose the lies for what they are. Once exposed, lies lose their power. Light reveals that there are no real walls, only illusions built from past pain and self-doubt. The chains that once felt heavy dissolve the moment you realize they were never locked in the first place. The battle for mental freedom is ongoing, but every victory begins with a single moment of truth. The moment you stop accepting defeat as your destiny. The moment you decide that just because a thought feels true doesn't mean it is. The moment you dare to believe that your mind doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a sanctuary. The walls will not fall because someone else tears them down. They will fall because you stop building them. When that happens, you discover something powerful. The only prison that ever existed was the one you believed in. The greatest weapon the enemy ever uses against you is not sickness, poverty, or even people. It's deception. He knows that if he can control how you think, he can control how you live. Lies are his language, and confusion is his strategy. He doesn't come with chains, he comes with suggestions. He doesn't shout, he whispers. His goal isn't just to make you sin. It's to make you doubt who you are. Because once your identity is shaken, everything else starts to crumble. You begin to question your value, your purpose, your strength. And when you believe his lies, you start living like they're true. Deception begins subtly. It doesn't announce itself as evil. It often sounds logical, emotional, or even comforting. It says, you'll never change when you're struggling. It says, you're all alone when you're hurting. It says, God has forgotten you when you're waiting. Those words may sound harmless, but they plant seeds that grow into strongholds. A stronghold is not a demon sitting on your shoulder. It's a lie sitting in your mind, dressed as truth. It's a thought you've believed for so long that it feels like reality. That's why the enemy doesn't need to tie your hands. If he can trap your thinking, he's already won half the battle. The power of deception is that it distorts your vision. You start seeing the world, yourself, and even God through the lens of lies. You interpret every failure as final, every delay as denial. Every challenge is proof that you're not enough. You stop praying bold prayers because you don't believe they'll be answered. You stop stepping forward because you expect to fall. That's exactly what the enemy wants, to make you surrender in your mind long before you even fight in real life. But here's the truth. Deception only works as long as it stays hidden. The moment you confront it with light, its power dissolves. That's why truth is not just information, it's liberation. Every time you align your thoughts with what God says, you break another layer of deception. When you remind yourself that you are loved, chosen, and equipped, you strip the enemy of his influence. Lies cannot survive in the presence of truth. The mind that was once a battlefield becomes a place of peace when you replace deception with revelation. So when the enemy says you're defeated, truth says you're more than a conqueror. When the lie says you're worthless, truth says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. When deception says it's over, truth says God is just getting started. The key is not to debate the lie, but to declare the truth louder. Every time you speak truth over your life, you take back ground that deception once occupied. The mind that was once under siege becomes a fortress of faith. The greatest victory you can ever win is not over others. It's over the lies that have tried to define you. Once you stop believing deception, you start living in destiny. The enemy loses all authority the moment you realize his only weapon was a lie. Renewing your mind is not a one-time event. It's a daily, deliberate process of transformation. You cannot think your way out of bondage with the same thoughts that built the cage. Freedom requires new patterns, new focus, and new truth. The mind must be trained just like the body. It doesn't automatically lean toward faith, peace, and clarity. It drifts toward worry, fear, and doubt. That's why the word says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation doesn't begin when circumstances change. It begins when your thoughts do. You can't live a new life with an old mindset. Renewal starts with awareness. You have to recognize which thoughts are keeping you stuck. Every negative pattern you accept becomes a mental chain that holds you down. When you constantly think, I'll never get through this, or I'm just not good enough, you're reinforcing the very walls that imprison you. But when you replace those thoughts with, I can do all things through Christ, or I am more than a conqueror, you begin to rebuild your mind on the foundation of truth. The more you feed your mind truth, the weaker the lies become. Lies starve in the presence of God's word. The process of renewing your mind isn't comfortable because it requires confrontation. You have to confront thoughts you've allowed to live rent-free in your head for years. You have to challenge the narratives that came from pain, trauma, and failure. It's like cleaning out a house that's been cluttered for too long. Things you once tolerated have to go. Renewal means eviction of every idea that doesn't align with who God says you are. That's not easy, but it's necessary. You can't make room for peace while still entertaining fear. You can't invite in faith while doubt is still sitting at the table. Renewal requires replacement. Over time, as your mind begins to align with truth, transformation starts to show up in your life. You respond differently to pressure. You handle rejection with peace instead of bitterness. You wake up with purpose instead of anxiety. It doesn't mean everything around you changes overnight, but your perception shifts. And that's where true power lies. Because once your mind changes, everything else has to follow. Your actions, your habits, your relationships, even your prayers begin to rise to a higher level. The renewed mind doesn't wait for external validation. It knows who it is and whose it is. It doesn't panic when storms come. It remembers who's in the boat. It doesn't surrender to fear. It speaks faith. Renewal builds resilience, and resilience produces strength. That's why the enemy fights hardest in your thoughts, because if he can stop renewal, he can block transformation. But once your mind is renewed, the prison collapses. The same place where you once felt trapped becomes the very ground where victory is born. The more you renew your mind, the more heaven's power flows through your life. You stop reacting to problems and start responding with purpose. You stop living from emotion and start living from revelation. Renewal doesn't just change how you think, it changes who you become. It's the key that unlocks transformation from the inside out. Fear is the warden that guards the prison of the mind. It keeps people locked in cycles of hesitation, insecurity, and regret. Fear whispers, what if you fail? Until you stop trying. It tells you you're not enough until you start believing it. It paints the worst possible picture of the future until you become paralyzed in the present. But the truth is, fear is not a force. It's a forecast, a prediction of defeat that hasn't even happened yet. It feeds on imagination, grows through doubt, and thrives in silence. The moment you replace it with faith, it loses all authority. Faith and fear cannot occupy the same space. They are opposites, not companions. Fear looks at the storm and says, I'll drown. Faith looks at the same storm and says, my God walks on water. Fear focuses on the problem. Faith focuses on the promise. Fear says, look how big the mountain is. Faith says, look how great my God is. The difference isn't what you face. It's what you believe while you're facing it. That's why Scripture so often tells us, do not fear. It's not just a suggestion, it's a command. Because fear disconnects you from heaven's flow. You cannot experience divine power while agreeing with earthly panic. Fear often disguises itself as wisdom. It says, be realistic, when what it really means is stay small. It says, be careful, when it really means don't move. But faith doesn't ignore reality, it overrides it. Faith doesn't deny that the fire is hot. It just believes there's a fourth man in the flames. The problem is never the size of the challenge. It's the size of the belief you hold within. When fear rules your mind, you see obstacles. When faith rules your mind, you see opportunities. Replacing fear with faith doesn't mean pretending you're not afraid. It means choosing to believe something greater than your fear. Every time fear rises, respond with faith. When fear says, you'll never get out of this, faith says, God is making a way. When fear says, you're not capable, faith says, I am equipped for every good work. When fear says, you've lost too much, faith says, nothing is wasted in the hands of God. The mind learns through repetition, so the more you speak faith, the less space fear has to live. The truth is, fear cannot survive in a heart that is full of faith. It suffocates in the presence of trust. Every time you declare what you believe instead of what you fear, you are demolishing another wall in the mental prison. Faith becomes the key that opens doors no man can shut. It's not about having perfect confidence. It's about holding on even when your knees shake. The power of faith isn't in how loud you shout it, but in how deeply you live it. Fear will always knock, but you don't have to answer. Let faith open the door instead. When you do, peace replaces panic, courage replaces anxiety, and strength replaces weakness. The same mind that once trembled under fear becomes a sanctuary of trust. And in that moment, heaven's power begins to move, not because fear left, but because faith stayed. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful keys to unlock the prison of the mind. Many people live bound not because of what others did to them, but because of what they refuse to release. Bitterness becomes a chain. Resentment becomes a wall. The mind replays the pain, the betrayal, the injustice over and over until it becomes a mental movie that never stops. Every time you relieve that hurt, you strengthen the bars around your own soul. Unforgiveness doesn't punish the one who hurt you. It punishes you. It keeps your mind anchored to the past, unable to move into the future. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means choosing to stop carrying it. It means deciding that the offense no longer has the power to control your peace. It's not about approving what was wrong. It's about freeing yourself from its grip. When you hold on to unforgiveness, you give the past permission to dictate your present. You let the memory of one moment dominate every new opportunity. But when you forgive, you break that cycle. You take back authority over your own mind and emotions. The enemy loves unforgiveness because it poisons your perspective. You can't see clearly when you're carrying bitterness. It colors every thought, every relationship, every decision. You begin to expect betrayal everywhere you go because you're still living in the shadow of the last one. But forgiveness clears the fog. It lets light back into your heart. You begin to think differently, to see differently, to breathe differently. Forgiveness doesn't just heal relationships. It heals perception. It's important to remember that forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a choice. You don't wait until the pain disappears before you forgive. You forgive so the pain can disappear. It's an act of strength, not weakness. It says, I refuse to let what you did define who I am. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the offender, it releases the offended. It opens the door of your mental prison and lets peace walk in. The person who hurt you may never apologize, but that's not your responsibility. Your healing doesn't depend on their repentance. It depends on your release. When you forgive, you make room for freedom. You stop rehearsing the wound and start rebuilding your life. You stop fighting battles that ended long ago and begin walking in new beginnings. Your mind becomes lighter, your heart softer, your spirit stronger. Forgiveness restores clarity and joy. It reconnects you with God's peace because unforgiveness blocks that flow. You cannot hold bitterness in one hand and expect blessing in the other. One has to go for the other to grow. The truth is, forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. It's the key that opens the cell door from the inside. The moment you decide to forgive, you're not saying what they did was right. You're saying you won't let it keep you bound any longer. You're saying, I choose peace over pain. I choose freedom over bitterness. I choose to walk out of the prison in my mind. And when you do, you'll feel heaven's power move because nothing sets the captive free like forgiveness. The way you talk to yourself determines the way you live. Many people are trapped in the prison of their own words. Not the words others have spoken over them, but the ones they repeat in their minds every single day. I'm not good enough. I'll never make it. I always mess things up. These phrases sound harmless, but they carry power. The Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue. That includes the words you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. Negative self-talk is like poison that drips slowly into the soul until it convinces you that you are less than who God made you to be. Your thoughts form your identity and your words reinforce it. If you keep saying you're broken, you'll start to live like you're beyond repair. If you keep saying you're a failure, you'll stop trying before you even begin. But when you begin to replace those lies with truth, something powerful happens. Your identity begins to align with heaven's perspective. You stop seeing yourself through the lens of weakness and start seeing yourself through the eyes of grace. You remember that you are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by your Maker. You were never meant to live by the labels life placed on you. The world may call you not enough, but God calls you chosen. The enemy may say you're too damaged, but God says you're redeemed. The mirror may show you flaws, but heaven sees purpose. The prison in your mind begins to fall apart when you stop agreeing with lies about who you are. The voice you believe is the voice that controls your direction. If you want to walk in freedom, you must silence the inner critic and amplify the truth of your divine identity. Start declaring what heaven says about you, even when you don't feel it. Say, I am loved, I am forgiven, I am equipped, I am capable. These aren't just affirmations, they're declarations of alignment. Every time you speak them, you're reprogramming your mind to match the truth of your design. You're training your thoughts to follow faith instead of fear. You're reminding your soul that your worth was settled long before your mistakes ever appeared. It takes discipline to replace negative self-talk with truth, because the enemy will always try to make lies sound louder. But you have authority over your inner voice. You decide what echoes in your mind. When you fill that space with words of courage and identity, you begin to experience a peace that no external circumstance can take away. You begin to live with confidence that isn't arrogance. It's awareness of who you are in God's eyes. So stop letting your inner dialogue defeat you. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not what people said about you. You are what God says about you, fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen with purpose, and equipped with power. When you embrace that truth, the mental prison doors swing wide open. The voice that once condemned you becomes the same voice that encourages you. And when your words align with heaven's truth, your life begins to reflect heaven's freedom. Your mind will always move in the direction of your most dominant thoughts. What you focus on grows. What you neglect fades. That's why disciplining your thoughts is not just helpful. It's essential. The undisciplined mind is like a wild horse. It will run wherever fear, distraction, or temptation lead it. But when you learn to take control of your thoughts, you take control of your life. Freedom begins when you decide that not every thought deserves your attention, not every fear deserves your energy, and not every memory deserves to replay in your mind. Discipline of the mind doesn't mean you'll never have negative thoughts again. It means those thoughts no longer control you. It means when anxiety tries to rise, you choose peace instead. When doubt whispers, you choose faith instead. You stop letting your emotions drive your decisions. Instead, you guide your emotions with truth. The mind is a battlefield, and the victory doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from thinking higher. You can't control every thought that enters your mind, but you can control which ones stay. Every thought that enters your mind is either a seed from heaven or a lie from hell. If you water the wrong seed, it will grow into strongholds that keep you bound. But if you nurture truth, faith, and gratitude, they will grow into peace, power, and purpose. The key is focus. Focus is the filter that decides which thoughts take root. When your focus stays fixed on fear, you magnify problems. When your focus stays fixed on faith, you magnify God's promises. The difference between anxiety and peace is often just a shift in focus. To discipline your mind, you have to practice spiritual awareness. Start catching your thoughts early, before they take root. When a thought of fear enters, ask, does this align with truth? When a thought of failure appears, ask, is this what God says about me? If not, reject it. Replace it immediately with what's real, not what's imagined. The enemy wants to occupy your focus because he knows your focus determines your future. But when you guard your mental gates, what you watch, what you read, what you repeat, you protect your peace. A disciplined mind is a powerful mind. It doesn't drift aimlessly, it lives intentionally. It doesn't react impulsively, it responds with wisdom. Discipline is not restriction, it's direction. It's the decision to point your thoughts toward truth, even when lies feel louder. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you're training your spirit to stay free. Every time you choose patience over panic, you're building strength. Every time you choose gratitude over grumbling, you're creating space for joy. The secret to mastering your focus is consistency. You don't win the battle of the mind once, you win it daily. Freedom isn't achieved by a single thought, it's maintained by a renewed mindset. When your thoughts come under discipline, your emotions follow, your habits align, and your life transforms. The same mind that once created your prison becomes the instrument of your liberation. Because when your thoughts serve truth instead of fear, you stop surviving and start soaring. You were never meant to walk through life alone. The voices you surround yourself with shape the direction of your mind and the condition of your heart. If you're constantly around people who feed your fear, your faith will shrink. If you're surrounded by voices that remind you of your failures, your hope will fade. But if you surround yourself with voices that speak life, truth, and encouragement, your spirit will rise above the noise. You can't walk in freedom while living among chains of negativity. The company you keep determines the climate of your mind. The wrong voices can keep you bound without ever touching you. Some people carry words that sound like concern, but carry the weight of limitation. Be careful, don't aim too high. That's just how life is. These phrases may sound harmless, but they water the seeds of fear and doubt. Every time you agree with them, you build another wall in your mental prison. But the right voices, the ones rooted in truth and faith, speak to the part of you that remembers who you are. They call out the best in you. They remind you that your story isn't over. Surrounding yourself with voices of faith doesn't mean isolating from the world. It means being intentional about what you let influence you. It's not just about people, it's about input. What are you listening to? What do you watch? What do you read? Every word you consume becomes a brick in your mindset. If you constantly feed your mind with negativity, drama, and fear, you'll end up building the very prison you're trying to escape. But if you feed your mind with wisdom, faith, and truth, you'll start building a temple of peace. Sometimes freedom requires separation. You can't soar if you're surrounded by people who prefer the ground. There will be seasons where you have to step back from certain relationships, not because you don't love them, but because you love your peace more. Protecting your mind means protecting your circle. It's okay to distance yourself from voices that drain your spirit. It's not pride, it's preservation. The people you spend the most time with are the people you begin to mirror. So ask yourself, do the voices around me push me closer to fear or closer to faith? The truth is, you become like what you hear. That's why you must keep your ears open to voices of hope, not despair, wisdom, not confusion, peace, not panic. When you make space for truth, faith starts to rise naturally. When you listen to those who carry light, darkness loses its grip. Even one encouraging voice can shift your entire mindset. Freedom flows in community, one where truth is spoken, faith is nurtured, and love is real. Choose friends who remind you of your purpose when you forget. Listen to mentors who speak destiny into your doubt. Surround yourself with people who see your potential, not just your past. Because when your environment speaks life, your mind begins to heal. The right voices won't just motivate you, they'll elevate you. And when your circle becomes filled with faith, fear no longer finds a home in your mind. Pain is one of life's greatest teachers, but most people try to escape it instead of learning from it. The truth is, you can't avoid pain. It's part of the human experience. But you can choose what it produces in you. Pain can either become the prison that traps you or the process that transforms you. The difference lies in perspective. When you see pain only as punishment, it breaks you. But when you see pain as preparation, it builds you. Every struggle, every tear, every heartbreak can carry hidden purpose if you allow it to. Your perspective determines whether pain makes you bitter or better. When your mind interprets pain through fear, you feel trapped and hopeless. But when you interpret it through faith, you begin to see meaning in the middle of the mess. Pain may not make sense while you're in it, but faith whispers that God is doing something with it. Every setback can become a setup. Every delay can become development. What looks like loss can become the seed of growth. Freedom doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from redeeming it. When you shift your perspective, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this producing in me? That shift is powerful. It turns confusion into clarity and suffering into strength. The mind that once complained begins to comprehend. The heart that once broke begins to believe again. Pain exposes what's weak, but also reveals what's strong. You don't truly know the depth of your faith until it's tested. The storm doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to show you what's inside you. Training your perspective means choosing to see beyond the surface. It means trusting that even in the valley, there's value. Even in the fire, there's refining. Even in the darkness, there's direction. Pain is never wasted when it's placed in divine hands. Sometimes God allows discomfort not to punish you, but to reposition you. He shakes what's unstable so he can strengthen what's eternal. You can't experience resurrection without first going through a cross. When you begin to view pain through purpose, you stop running from it. You rise through it. You realize that pain is not the end of your story. It's part of the process that leads to glory. The mind that once saw suffering as a curse begins to see it as a classroom. Every scar becomes a testimony. Every wound becomes wisdom. The very thing that tried to break you becomes the thing that builds your resilience. Freedom doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. It means pain will no longer control your peace. It means the same fire that once burned you now purifies you. The same storm that once scared you now strengthens you. When your perspective is anchored in purpose, pain loses its power to imprison your mind. Instead, it becomes the key that opens your next level. Because once you understand that even pain has purpose, you stop fearing it and start using it to propel you toward freedom. Prayer is where the chains of the mind begin to break. Not because prayer changes every circumstance, but because it changes you in the midst of it. It is not simply a ritual or a religious habit. It's a lifeline. Prayer connects the limited mind of man with the limitless power of God. When you pray, you're not talking to the air. You're inviting heaven to realign your thoughts, restore your peace, and renew your strength. In prayer, your mind learns to surrender what it cannot control and receive what it cannot produce on its own. Divine strength, divine wisdom, divine calm. The mind grows weary when it tries to carry everything alone. You start analyzing every detail, worrying about outcomes, and replaying problems until exhaustion sets in. That's when prayer steps in as a release valve. When you pray, you offload the weight that was never meant for you to bear. You stop striving to fix everything and start trusting the one who already holds everything together. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving over. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because the more you hold on, the heavier life feels. But the moment you release it in prayer, peace begins to flow like oxygen to the soul. Prayer renews strength because it shifts your focus. When you stop staring at the problem and start focusing on God's presence, your perspective changes. The mountain may still be there, but now you remember that you serve the one who moves mountains. The storm may not stop, but you realize who controls the wind. The mind that was once filled with fear becomes filled with faith, not because the situation changed, but because your trust deepened. Prayer teaches the heart to rest while the world is still shaking. In prayer, surrender and strength walk hand in hand. You kneel to rise. You empty yourself to be filled. You admit your weakness so his power can be perfected in you. Every time you pray, you're retraining your mind to depend less on anxiety and more on alignment. You're reminding yourself that control was never the goal, connection was. When your thoughts start to spiral, prayer interrupts the chaos and invites stillness. You stop being the prisoner of your thoughts and become the possessor of peace. True freedom is found in that quiet exchange where your worries are traded for wisdom, your fear for faith, your exhaustion for endurance. Prayer renews not just your spirit, but your mindset. It reminds you that you are never alone in the fight. Every word you whisper in faith is heard, even when the world is silent. Every tear shed in prayer waters the soil of transformation. When you live a life of prayer and surrender, you stop reacting to life's pressures and start responding with power. The prison in your mind loses its grip because you've placed your thoughts in greater hands. You no longer walk by sight. You walk by trust. Prayer becomes the bridge that carries you from panic to peace, from weariness to strength, from captivity to freedom. The mind that prays consistently cannot stay bound because where surrender lives, freedom follows. Freedom is not a moment. It's a mindset you choose every day. Many people experience brief moments of breakthrough, an emotional high, a temporary peace, but then they drift back into old thoughts that rebuild the same prison they just escaped from. Real freedom requires consistency. It's waking up every morning and choosing to think differently, to speak differently, to believe differently. You can't just visit freedom on Sundays. You have to live in it daily because the battlefield isn't around you, it's within you. Every day your mind will try to pull you back into fear, doubt, and negativity. But every day you have the power to respond, not today. Walking in freedom means renewing your mind through truth. It means you stop feeding the lies that kept you bound and start nurturing the truth that sets you free. The world will always whisper reasons to be afraid, to feel unworthy, to quit. But the voice of truth speaks louder when you learn to listen. When you fill your mind with gratitude instead of grumbling, with hope instead of helplessness, you begin to see change not just in your thoughts, but in your entire life. Freedom flows from what you focus on. If you dwell on the pain, you'll stay stuck in the past. But if you dwell on purpose, you'll keep moving forward. Freedom also demands discipline. You cannot walk in liberty while entertaining the same chains. That means guarding what you allow into your mind, what you watch, what you hear, what you repeat. Every thought is a seed. If you plant fear, you'll harvest anxiety. If you plant faith, you'll harvest peace. Walking in freedom means tending to your mental garden daily, pulling out weeds before they take root. It means being intentional about what you think, what you say, and who you surround yourself with. Freedom grows in the soil of focus and faithfulness. Walking daily in freedom doesn't mean life will be easy. It means you'll no longer face it as a captive. You'll face it as someone who knows who they are and whose they are. When challenges come, you won't crumble. You'll confront them with courage. When doubts whisper, you'll answer with truth. When fear knocks, you'll remind it that it has no authority in your house anymore. Freedom gives you confidence, not arrogance, peace, not passivity, strength, not stubbornness. It makes you resilient. It transforms your mindset from victim to victor, from worrier to warrior. And as you live this way, your freedom begins to ripple outward. The same peace that changed your mind begins to touch your home, your relationships, your atmosphere. People will notice a difference, not because you've become perfect, but because you've become free. And freedom is contagious. It lights up dark rooms. It inspires the broken. It glorifies the one who set you free. So walk in that freedom daily. Don't let yesterday's mistakes define today's mindset. Don't let old chains call you back to the prison you already left. Every sunrise is another chance to live unbound, to think higher, to walk lighter. Freedom isn't something you wait for. It's something you walk in. And the more you walk in it, the less power the past will ever have over you again.